After 10 years of relationship with a girl, I found out that she was cheating on me and called all her friends and publicly opposed her. I spent 10 years living a lie. 10 years thinking I was in a loving, committed relationship with the woman I planned to spend forever with. I thought we had something real, something solid, something unbreakable. Turns out, I was the only one who believed that. It started with a text. Not even one meant for me. It was a message she sent to someone else, a man whose name I didn't recognize. I wasn't the snooping type, but that night, as she sat beside me on the couch, her phone lit up with a preview. "I can't wait to see you tonight." He has no idea. 10 years and he's still clueless. The world around me seemed to slow down. My fingers clenched, my heart pounded, but I kept my face neutral. I turned my head to look at her. She was laughing at something on TV, unaware that her perfect little web of lies had just started to unravel. I could have confronted her then. I could have grabbed her phone and demanded an explanation. But after 10 years of trust, love, and sacrifice, she had done this to me. She didn't deserve an easy way out. No, I needed to know everything before I made my move. For the next week, I played the role of the devoted boyfriend. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings, brought home her favorite takeout, and listened to her stories about work. But when she left the house, I followed. I watched where she went, who she met, and how effortlessly she slipped into a life I had never known existed. She wasn't just cheating. She had been living a double life. There were dinners with another man, whispered phone calls late at night, and weekend trips she claimed were for work. But what made me sick to my stomach was the realization that this wasn't new. It wasn't some temporary lapse in judgment. It had been happening for a decade. The thought made my blood boil. 10 years of my life wasted. 10 years I could never get back. But I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I started planning. First, I gathered evidence, photos, screenshots, every little detail I could find. I wanted the truth to be undeniable. Then, I set the stage for my revenge. She had taken so much from me, but I was about to take everything from her. I knew exactly where to start. Her job was her pride and joy, a high-paying corporate position she had clawed her way into. I had supported her through it all, late-night study sessions for her certifications, networking events I endured just to be by her side. And now, I had the proof that would ruin her. With an anonymous email, I sent every incriminating detail to her boss. Companies don't take kindly to employees who lie about their business trips while sneaking off to luxury hotels with their side piece. Then, I turned to her finances. We had joint accounts, something she had insisted on when we moved in together. I started transferring money out, slowly, carefully, into an account she didn't know existed. It was my money, anyway. The money I had earned while she was out betraying me. And finally, the masterpiece of my revenge, the confrontation. I invited her family and closest friends over for dinner. She was thrilled, thinking I was finally going to propose after all these years. She had no idea that tonight, her perfect world was about to collapse. When everyone arrived, I stood up, raised my glass, and with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, I said, to 10 years of love, trust, and commitment. And to the 10 years I spent being a complete idiot. Confusion filled the room. My girlfriend, no, my ex, froze, her smile faltering. "What are you talking about?" she laughed nervously. I set my phone on the table, pressed play, and let the recordings speak for themselves. Messages, phone calls, photos. Her voice, clear as day, saying things she could never take back. Her mother gasped. Her best friend's face turned pale. And her lover? Oh, he was there too, squirming in his seat, realizing he had walked straight into a trap. She tried to talk her way out of it. She cried, pleaded, swore it was all a misunderstanding. But I just stood there, watching the life she had built on lies crumble before her eyes. And when she finally looked at me, desperate and broken, I leaned in and whispered, "You never should have underestimated me." The aftermath was chaos. Her mother sat in stunned silence, unable to process what she had just heard. Her best friend, who, judging by her expression, had no clue about the double life, shook her head in disbelief. And him? The man she had been sneaking around with for a decade? He stood up so fast he knocked his chair over, mumbling something about how he didn't sign up for this, before bolting out the door like a coward. I turned to her, watching as she sat there frozen, eyes wide and filled with sheer panic. This was it. The moment she realized there was no escape. "You're insane," she finally whispered, her voice shaking. "How long have you known?" "A while," I said. Swirling the wine in my glass like this was nothing more than an interesting conversation. "Long enough to know you never loved me. Long enough to know I wasted a decade of my life on someone who didn't deserve it." She reached for my arm, her eyes pleading. "Please, we can talk about this. You don't have to do this in front of everyone." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity was unbelievable. "Oh, but I do. You stole 10 years from me. I'm just taking one night from you." Then I leaned in, just close enough so only she could hear me. "And I'm not even close to done." She flinched. Her father, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke up. "I don't even know who you are anymore," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Is this true?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The evidence spoke for itself. Then, her boss, yes, I had invited him too, stood up. "I think we'll need to have a conversation first thing Monday morning," he said, adjusting his tie before heading for the door. She turned ghostly pale. This was the part one had been waiting for. The moment where everything she had built, everything she had taken for granted, started slipping through her fingers. When the guests finally left, the house was dead silent. She sat on the couch, shoulders slumped, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. I stood across from her, arms crossed. "You're going to ask why, aren't you?" She didn't respond. "I'm going to tell you anyway," I continued. "I didn't do this just for revenge. I did this to show you what it feels like to have something stolen from you." Her hands clenched into fists. "So that's it? You destroy my life and just walk away?" I smiled. "Oh, sweetheart. I'm just getting started." She had no idea just how deep my revenge went. Losing her job? That was just the beginning. The day after the dinner, she woke up to a bank account that looked a lot lighter than before. Turns out, when you share finances with someone, it's quite easy to move things around when you know what you're doing. She called me, furious. "Where's my money?" "Our money," I corrected. "You know, the money I worked for while you were out playing house with another man." "You can't just take everything," she shrieked. "Oh, but I can," I said, my voice calm. And I did. "Go ahead, check with the bank. The transactions were all made legally." She screamed something incoherent and hung up. I sat back in my chair, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Satisfaction. I had spent years being the supportive partner, the dependable one, the fool who thought love meant sacrifice. But love wasn't supposed to be a one-sided game. Love wasn't supposed to feel like being taken for granted. And now, she was learning that lesson the hard way. The final blow came a week later. Her landlord called. She had been living in our shared apartment, well, my apartment, since I had left. But I had one last trick up my sleeve. I had taken my name off the lease. The moment the new month rolled in, the landlord knocked on the door with an eviction notice. Without my income, without her cushy job, she had no way to afford rent. She called me in tears. "You can't do this to me," she begged. "I have nowhere to go." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at my new place, a nicer, better apartment with no memories of her. "And whose fault is that?" "You're heartless," she spat. "I loved you." I laughed. Really laughed this time. "You loved me? You spent a decade lying to me. That's not love. That's convenience." She sobbed. For a brief moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered all the nights I spent waiting for her to come home, wondering why she was late. I remembered all the times I trusted her, defended her, loved her blindly. And I remembered the text that started it all, 10 years and he's still clueless. No, I wasn't clueless anymore. "You'll be fine," I said, my voice void of emotion. "You always find someone to take care of you. But this time, it won't be me." And with that, I hung up. She was out of my life. And for the first time in 10 years, I was free. Update 1. The first few days after I cut her off were quiet. Too quiet. For 10 years, my life had been built around her. I had planned my days around our routines, my future around our supposed forever. Now, for the first time in a decade, I had no texts to reply to, no "I'm running late" calls, no obligations to consider anyone but myself. And honestly, it felt strange. Not bad. Just strange. But that feeling didn't last long. Because as much as I had walked away, she wasn't ready to let go. It started with texts. Long, rambling messages swinging wildly between anger and desperation. "How could you do this to me? You ruined my life. Please, just talk to me. I can explain everything." Explain what? That she had spent a decade lying to me? That every business trip was a rendezvous with another man? That I had spent 10 years being Plan B while she lived out some fantasy with someone else? No, she didn't get to explain. She lost that right the second she decided I wasn't worth honesty. So I didn't reply. Then came the calls. Dozens of them. At all hours. Blocked. Then she started showing up at places she knew I frequented, my gym, my favorite cafe, even outside my new apartment. I'd see her from a distance, pacing, waiting, hoping to corner me into a conversation. But she didn't get to decide when or if we talked. That was my choice now. And I had made it. I ignored her. Until she pulled her last, desperate move. She went to my family. I was at my parents' house for dinner when my mom's phone rang. She answered with her usual warm, "Hello, sweetheart," before her smile faltered. "Oh. It's you." That was all I needed to hear. She put the call on speaker, and there she was, my ex, sobbing dramatically, spinning a sob story about how I had destroyed her life. How I had left her with nothing. How she didn't understand what she had done to deserve this. My mother listened quietly, arms crossed, until my ex finally broke down into full-blown theatrics. "Please, can you just tell him to talk to me?" she begged. "He won't even give me a chance to explain." That's when my mom finally spoke. "Explain what, exactly?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "Explain how you lied to him for 10 years? Explain how you stole a decade of his life and thought he'd never find out?" There was silence on the other end. "You don't deserve a conversation," my mom continued. "You deserve exactly what you got. Now, don't call here again." Then she hung up. I had never loved my mother more. She turned to me, gave me a long look, then simply said, "I raised you to be kind, but I didn't raise you to be a fool." Damn right. After that, she finally gave up. I heard through mutual friends that she had left town. No job, no apartment, no support system, just a mess of consequences she never saw coming. Apparently, her lover, the one she had spent a decade sneaking around with, had bailed the second things got difficult. Turns out, he liked the thrill of the affair but had no interest in taking care of a woman who had just lost everything. Karma is funny that way. And me? I moved on. I started going out more, meeting new people, rediscovering hobbies I had abandoned during my relationship. I went to the gym consistently, focused on work, and started traveling, something I had always wanted to do but never had the freedom for. It took time, but eventually, the memories of her faded into nothing more than a lesson learned. And one night, as I sat on a beach, drink in hand, watching the sunset in a place I had always dreamed of visiting, I realized something. I wasn't broken. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was free. Update 2. Months passed. Then a year. I thought about her less and less. The memories of our time together, once so sharp and painful, became nothing more than background noise. If someone asked about her, I would shrug. She was just a part of my past now, nothing more. And then, one day, she came back. It started with a message. "Hey. Can we talk?" I almost laughed. Talk? After all this time? After everything she had done? I left it on read. Then came another. "I just want to apologize. Please." Now she wanted to apologize. Not when she got caught. Not when she was watching her life fall apart. But now, when she thought enough time had passed that I would be willing to listen. I wasn't. But part of me was curious. So I did what any sane person would do, I checked her social media. It was a disaster. Gone were the polished, carefully curated pictures of her perfect life. Instead, her posts were vague and cryptic, full of thinly veiled complaints about betrayal and people who turned their backs on her. The man she had been cheating with? Long gone. Her career? Dead in the water. And her social circle? Nearly non-existent. She had gambled everything, and lost. I should have felt bad. I should have felt something. But all I felt was, nothing. That's when I realized I had truly moved on. She, however, hadn't. She started showing up again. Accidentally bumping into me at places she used to avoid. Trying to start conversations as if we were just old friends catching up. I never engaged. One day, she finally worked up the nerve to approach me directly. I was at a cafe, minding my own business, when she sat down across from me. I sighed. What do you want? I just want to say I'm sorry. She looked different. Tired. Worn down by the weight of her own mistakes. I never meant to hurt you. I took a sip of my coffee. But you did. She swallowed hard. I know. And I regret it every day. I studied her for a long moment. Maybe she was being sincere. Maybe she wasn't. It didn't really matter. You know what's funny? I said. I spent so much time thinking about what I'd say to you if I ever saw you again. I thought I'd yell. I thought I'd demand answers. But now that you're here, I don't feel anything at all. Her eyes filled with tears. I just want to fix things. I chuckled, shaking my head. You can't fix what's already broken. She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't wait to hear it. I stood up, tossed a few bills on the table, and walked away. That was the last time I saw her. Life moved forward. I traveled more. I met new people. I fell in love again, not the blind, foolish kind of love I had once mistaken for devotion, but something real. Something built on trust. And one day, years later, I looked back at that chapter of my life and felt something I never thought I would. Gratitude. Because she had taught me a lesson I would never forget. And in the end, I won. Not by destroying her. Not by holding on to my anger. But by letting go. By living well. By being happy. And that, I realized, was the best revenge of all. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.